Well, it's a pleasure to be joined now here on GCR by a man who has been a part of all of our lives as sports fans for a long time. And he's got a fun new book out. It's called Got Your Number. Wrote it with his producer, Hembo. And it's a fun coffee table. The point of this book is for me to get mad about it and for me to fight with him. Mike Greenberg, how in the hell is Brooks Robinson not your choice for number 5? This book is terrible. I don't want to read it any longer.
Well, I will say this, and the honest reason that Brooks Robinson is not number 5 is because my father grew up in the Bronx in the 1930s.
Yeah.
It is as simple as that. I was raised to believe that we had questions about a lot of things, but the one thing we did not question is that Joe DiMaggio was a deity, and he will be that for as long as I live. And so even before the book was an idea in my brain, Joe DiMaggio was number 5.
I trust me, Mike. Joe DiMaggio is a fine selection. I know that. I am not unreasonable about this. Mike Greenberg is with us, and it really is a fun book. Take me through was the concept when you sat down to say, I want to take all of these numbers and I want to solve this puzzle. Who's the best at each number? Because that does get a little convoluted at points during the process. Or was it really, I want to come up with like a coffee table book that can kind of tell some of the history of sport, and numbers kind of provides a way to go about doing that?
Well, like most things, it happened completely by accident. And almost anything I've ever set out to do has not worked. And then every once in a while, something very fortuitous happens, and I am the beneficiary of it. So one day after we had finished the TV show, we were sitting around, a bunch of us on the staff, just a bunch of sports geeks sitting around talking. And someone made the observation, for no good reason, how many Hall of Fame quarterbacks all wore the jersey number 12? So Bob Greasy, Ken Stabler, Terry Bradshaw, Roger Staubach, Jim Kelly, and someday Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers.
Yep.
And someone in the room said, sure, they all wore the number 12, but who owns the number 12? And literally in that second, the idea just occurred to me. I called my literary agent and I said, I think I have an idea to do a book on who owns every number from 1 to 100. And he said, that's a pretty good idea. And so I talked it over with Hembo, and we went about trying to put it together. And the jersey numbers were easy. So, you don't need me to tell you who's number 3 and who's number 23 and who's number 99 and who's number 42. But what we immediately figured out was that we were about to do a book that didn't have room for Muhammad Ali, and didn't have room for Serena Williams, and didn't have room for Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus and the other greatest individual sport athletes and things like that. And so we realized, for example, that if I say the number 56, some people might immediately think of Lawrence Taylor. I think you could argue that maybe more people would think of Joe DiMaggio's hitting streak. And so we realized there are ways to give numbers to people, say they own numbers, that go well beyond just jersey numbers. So I would say maybe half the numbers in the book are jersey numbers, and the other half are numbers that derive from other places entirely. And that was the fun of it. So that we do not have a book that is filled with some of the greatest legends and heroes in sports history, but in this case, I think it is filled with almost all of them, and the numbers that they own. So that was where the idea came from, and that's how we did it.
And of course, that was relevant. It comes up with Cal Ripken, for example, where he's not number 8, but yet somewhere later in the book, you discover that Cal Ripken is still featured prominently using a different number that's very relevant to us. Again, the book is Got Your Number. Mike Greenberg is with us here on GCR. Mike, was there anything at all that even when you went back and you read the final book and decided everything that was going to be, but then you went back and said, oh, my God, we didn't get this person, or we didn't figure out a way to come up with it? Man, did you find yourself saying, I'm already mad at myself and the book isn't even out yet?
Yes, and mostly that has to do with the construction of timing. So all of the records and all of the statistics and all of the numbers that exist in the book, as we write, are valid, as of a certain date. Like some of the athletes are active, and there was nothing we could do about that. A book has to be put to bed, in our case, almost a year before it came out. And if we were to do it now, for example, I think I would give 15 to Patrick Mahomes. But a year ago at this time, I didn't think so. Like, he was coming off of playing a bad game in the AFC Championship game, and there were some questions about whether he was even a top guy of his own era anymore. Did he have competition for that? If I were writing the book today, I think I would put Mahomes at 15, and there were probably some others like that. So that's probably the biggest thing, is that over the course of time, Aaron Judge broke not the single season home run record, but in many people's view became the single season home run champion, or at least the clean single season home run champion. And it would have been nice perhaps to include him. We actually kicked around the idea of going back and redoing that, but it would have knocked Arnold Palmer out of the book, or it would have meant we needed to give Palmer a different number, which would have knocked someone else out of the book. So we decided to leave it. So that's the kind of thing that, because we were not discounting active athletes, active people, some of that was going to be unavoidable. And that I would say was the hardest part of that.
There's a lot of Baltimore connections. I mentioned Cal Ripken pops up. Thankfully, we got it right at number 19 with John Unitas. That one we might have actually thought about, by the way, Mike.
John Unitas, I think it is almost incredible to me how overlooked he is in the modern discussion of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And I think so much of that is based upon the fact that almost all record keeping now goes back to the merger, or goes back to the start of the Super Bowl era. And so much of Unitas' career came before that. Bart Starr falls into that as well. And obviously Unitas versus Starr is no person who knows anything about football history. Let's put it this way. If you start talking about the greatest quarterback rivalries in the history of pro football, and the person that you're talking to does not mention Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas, then immediately discount that conversation. It's if you're talking to a person who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. So when we talk about the great quarterbacks, and we mention Brady as we should, and we mention Montana as we should, and we mention, in my opinion, Elway as we should, and some of the others, if you don't mention Johnny Unitas, then you just don't know what you're talking about. There was a long period of time in which the answer to the question, who is the greatest quarterback that ever lived, was every bit as easy as it is now to answer, and the answer was Johnny Unitas.
Yep.
And so, I mean, anyone who wouldn't put him in a book like this, with all due respect to them, just doesn't have the first clue what they're talking about.
I want to be very clear. The answer is still John Unitas. Now, I got all due respect to Mr. Brady, but in this city, the answer will forever be John Unitas. That's just the way that it goes. Again,
I think it's a reasonable argument to defend. I think if you look at the totality of the accomplishments of the player, and particularly the longevity, it's just impossible for me to discount all the stuff that Brady has done. If Brady had stopped at 4, even if Brady had never won one without Belichick, then I could have seen some of the arguments to discount his career accomplishments. But at this point, I think it's impossible to do.
I promise I am not, even though I work in this business, I am not the completely unreasonable man that would try to fight about this. I do understand exactly what you're saying, Mike. I promise you.
Yeah.
And Mike, it's interesting that we have you, because speaking of unreasonable, there was a time a couple years ago we thought that maybe we might not know who the greatest number 8 was in Baltimore sports history, because a couple years ago we thought there was a guy that was on the trajectory to becoming that guy and maybe being equal to Cal Ripken in the way that we viewed him. We're not sure at this point where we are with Lamar Jackson. I know it's driving what you guys do every day on Get Up, on your show. Like, I understand it's all we're ever talking about. I wonder, as a Jets fan, like, if for some reason Aaron Rodgers tomorrow said, I'm done, right? Like, I just don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm retiring. I'm not going to go to New York. I am done playing football. It's over. Would you, as a Jets fan, wish to see the team pivot towards a very high price for Lamar Jackson?
Hell yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the easiest question I'll ever be asked. Have you seen the people the Jets have playing quarterback?
I understand that.
I know in the last 5 or 6 years, including in the draft in which Lamar was selected, the Jets took 2 quarterbacks in the top 3 picks. One of them is bad. The other one may literally be the worst player ever. Um, so, I mean, the idea of having Lamar Jackson sounds unbelievably good. I like the idea of Rodgers better because of the lesser cost, which is to say you don't have to go to a place where you have this 5-year guaranteed, fully guaranteed contract, and you don't have to trade 2 first-round picks. And I think that the result, while probably for a shorter period of time, might be just as good, if not better. If you told me that Rodgers wasn't an option and Lamar Jackson was, I think you would have to be insane as a fan not to jump at that. And look, I understand the complications of this, which is to say that I think NFL owners, since the inception of the league, have not wanted to give fully guaranteed contracts to players. It is one of the ways they exercise all of this power, control, and leverage over the players. It is candidly completely unfair, in my opinion, and has always been. A non-guaranteed contract to me is just a misnomer. It is like jumbo shrimp. What does that even mean? Like, you can't be both of those at the same time. Either we have a contract or we don't.
Right.
Either you agree you're going to pay me this money or we don't. The idea that every contract in the NFL is only guaranteed one way is just steadfastly unfair. But that's the way that business has been run forever, and the players don't seem to be able to change it in collective bargaining ever. So as long as those are the rules, I understand the owners not wanting to see it changed. So I understand why Steve Bisciotti is standing where he is, and I don't think any owner is rushing to do it. So I think this standoff has the potential to last a really long time. And for the life of me, I have no idea how it eventually ends.
Mike, we've gotten to the point where in local media, I have a meter over my shoulder that reads the percentage chance that I think Lamar Jackson is going to be the Ravens quarterback, because that's what we're doing to get by, because we're doing this every day, right? Like, this is the state.
And what is the meter at? What is it at? Right?
Well, there's a little radio secret here that when I'm talking to you, I need to adjust to what the news is going to be over the weekend. The most recent reading, as you and I discussed, was at 63%. 64% was the most recent reading. Because
64%, yes.
Yes, because we're at the point where the guy that founded the Globo Gym is now negotiating for Lamar Jackson. So who the hell knows what is going on in this process now, and what might.
What is the percentage chance that he isn't playing for anybody week one?
That's part of the reason why the number's only at 64%, because I'm factoring that into the equation. Mike, but you referenced something, and I promise I'm not going to keep you forever. I know how busy of a man you are. But you referenced something to me that is really interesting in when we talk about this from a fandom perspective, which is there are Ravens fans that are just kind of sick of it, and they're like, oh, I'm really ready to move on. And my response back is, ready to move on to what? What are you ready to move on to? Because we've been through this. Like, there was a day Joe Flacco was a savior to this franchise and wasn't in any way a Hall of Fame quarterback. If you're of a certain age, you remember when the Ravens were the team that was wandering through the wilderness. The danger of saying, hey, we don't want to pay this price, to me, is a much lesser risk than the danger of we might not have a quarterback. Because the moment you're that as an NFL franchise, you're irrelevant. Your existence is irrelevant as a franchise the moment you don't have a quarterback.
For sure. I can't understand any fan who doesn't want it to happen. It's not your money. I understand why the owner doesn't want to do it, because it is changing. It is creating a precedent. It is letting toothpaste that will never go back into the tube out. I can't understand any fan who is faced solely with the question, do I want someone else to spend a bunch of their money on keeping this guy as my quarterback or not?
Right.
I would invite that person to watch Zach Wilson play for 5 minutes and then tell me how they feel about it. Like, that's what's out there, folks. I mean, it is a vast wasteland. There are not 32 of these guys walking the face of planet Earth. And Lamar Jackson, I understand that it isn't everything that you want a quarterback to be, but it is so much, and it is, for the things he does better than anyone has ever done. And the answer to the question, can you win with him, I think, is undoubtedly yes. And when you say, why hasn't he won a championship yet? I would say, well, Joe Burrow hasn't won a championship yet, and Josh Allen hasn't won a championship yet. And a lot of other guys haven't won championships, and I never hear people ask those questions about them. I get that Lamar does it a little differently, but he does it brilliantly. And I can't fathom not wanting someone else to spend a bunch of their money to make sure he remains your quarterback for the next 5 years. I don't have any idea what you would be hoping happens instead.
My God, we are in strong agreement about this. You know, I've as someone who's watching, we have not always been in strong agreement about everything, but boy, we couldn't be in stronger agreement when it comes to this topic. Jesus.
Well, no two people who are even remotely interesting are
Yes,
ever going to be
yes.
in total agreement about
That's-
everything. I actually write that in the book, that sports is the only place where, in my opinion, subjects don't descend into debate; they ascend
Right.
into debate.
Right.
Sports debate is in my opinion, the healthiest and best form of debate that we have in America, because you and I could strongly disagree on this topic,
Yep.
or on Brooks Robinson, or on Johnny Unitas, or anything, and we would emerge from that debate not wishing ill upon each other. And I would still wish you well in your life. I would just disagree with your opinion, and I'd like to think you would feel the same way about me.
Unquestionable.
Whereas the way we disagree about almost everything else in America today sort of descends into, you're an evil person, and I hope terrible things happen to you. And so I think if all of our debate was held on a level that our sports debate is held, we would be a hell of a lot healthier as a society.
This almost sounds like your campaign speech, Mike. You better be careful. You might end up being
I'm running to become the president of sports. That's my goal. I want to be the president of all sports.
Got Your Number is the book. We will link it up, an Amazon link on our Twitter account at Glenn Clark Radio, and you can go check it out right now. Mike Greenberg, this is a lot of fun, man. Really enjoyed the book. Appreciate taking the time to join us this morning. Thanks so much for doing it.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it too.